Monster Hunter? What are you doing that?
My God! Oh my God, he's ripping one in half!
Heavy severing.
I was just...
You're looking great. Everybody's doing wonderfully.
There's just something about hunting monsters. Monster Hunter Wilds is the first Monster Hunter video game I've ever played. While many successful games are copied ad nauseum so much that they become their own genres, Monster Hunter remains a very unique series and its success has been difficult to replicate. It is something that is wholly and uniquely new to me, and I took to it like a duck to water. Monster Hunter, it turns out, is very, very fun. I've now killed Arkveld, the flagship monster of Monster Hunter Wilds, about 100 times at this point, as that's pretty much the only endgame challenge that is currently available, but it's still fun. Why? What makes this simple gameplay loop of preparing, hunting, and gathering so infinitely replayable and fun? But most importantly, what is fun? The etymology of the word fun is unknown, but the original use of the word was probably closer to the term make fun of, as in to fool. It is to be amused, but it is to be amused by something that we are doing, which is what makes it so applicable to games. It is interactive. It is in the act of play. Fun is incredibly difficult to define, not only because fun is entirely subjective, but because there are many different kinds of fun. Timothy Kane, developer of the Fallout games, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, and The Outer Worlds, has said that fun is the intersection of a bunch of roads. In this video, I'm going to map out some common roads in the intersection of fun and explore these ideas using Monster Hunter Wilds as an example. I'm going to talk about why we as humans want and need to play, how novelty can broaden our sense of identity, how and why multiplayer adds to that feeling of fun, and whether or not fun is dependent on having well-defined rules or in the freedom to push beyond established boundaries and get creative. This is the psychology of fun. Play, and thereby fun, is actually an essential and integral element in how we as human beings have evolved as a species. And not just human beings, but a good deal of animal life. Have you ever seen young animals play fight? There is a reason that they do that. When these animals are play fighting, dopamine releases and it becomes pleasurable or enjoyable to do. It is fun. Their brain rewards them with this fun chemical when they do this play fighting. But why does the brain reward them for play fighting? Well, because play is rehearsal. It is practice. Because an animal well versed in play fighting will be offered a greater chance in survival when they are confronted with a real fight. It may seem like a silly thing they do for fun, but they are actually training. And so are we when we hunt monsters. We're not literally training to hunt monsters. We don't enjoy Doom because it helps prepare us for a demonic incursion, or Call of Duty to practice our 360 no-scope headshots, but our brain is in much the same way rewarding us for doing behavior that it thinks we should be getting better at. Although we probably will never experience in our real lives the situations that we encounter in virtual worlds, we do encounter situations that rely on a similar skill set. We do need to prepare to handle stressful situations. We need to have the confidence to solve complex problems. We need to be able to manage what we have, gather what we can, and be resourceful. And it is competition that allows us to strive to be better than we are, to become more. And this is how we are motivated to get better and train. It is what has allowed us to evolve as a species. It is also our motivation to procreate. Dopamine is one of the pleasure chemicals that are released when we have sex. Without it, we wouldn't really have much motivation to do it. And it's the same with eating calorie-rich food. We do it because it feels good, and it feels good because it is necessary to our survival. But it is more complicated than that, because we don't always get dopamine even when we're doing things that are beneficial for us. Working a job that pays for our food and shelter should be more rewarding than killing Arkfeld for the 120th time, but unfortunately, it's not. Play fighting is more fun than fighting, and fun is more desirable to us than reality. We can often choose an immediate, consistent delivery of dopamine rather than do something that would be actually beneficial to us. Studies have shown that rats who have become dependent on drug-induced dopamine will choose it over food when given the choice, even to the point of starvation. Our experience with video games illustrate this pretty well. Managing your free time in accordance with your responsibilities as a high school student is a lot more fun in Persona than in life. Because when you are studying in Persona, you're not actually wrestling with difficult concepts. You're not actually learning. You're just watching a cutscene where you look at a book for 10 seconds and then a number is generated to indicate that you have become permanently smarter. You have been rewarded without any actual physical or intellectual effort, and that's what makes it play. It's not real. Video games are intentionally designed to trigger these dopamine releases in the same way that drugs do. Game designers want you to have fun. Some video games do this a lot better than others. Monster Hunter does it very well. In recent reviews of Monster Hunter Wilds, much has been said about the difficulty of the game, or lack thereof. I don't find Monster Hunter Wilds too easy, probably because I haven't played the other games in the series, and so I'm still learning a good deal about how it works. I am a noob. I actually find the highest level of challenge in Monster Hunter really interesting as a comparison to Elden Ring, which is a game I know pretty well. In Elden Ring, the difficulty is scaled by how much you restrict yourself, but in Monster Hunter, the pinnacle of challenge is speedruns. It's in the ability to kill a monster in the fastest possible time, and that for me is a good deal of the fun in endgame Monster Hunter, because unlike the FromSoft games, the feeling of getting stronger and stronger doesn't feel like it comes at the cost of satisfying combat. The rewards that drop from the endgame monsters, which fuel the development of your arty and weapons, feel very impactful because the stronger you are, the faster you kill, and the more resources you're able to gather. You become more and more efficient. The drops from monsters are determined by chance. This is the reason why you need to kill Arkfeld so many times. You're waiting for the right drop. But that waiting process isn't boring because the gameplay is satisfying. At least it wasn't boring for me. If it's boring for you, there is a good chance the reason for that is that you're much better at the game than I am. Our brain rewards us with dopamine when we're practicing behavior that it thinks is helpful or necessary to us. If we feel that it isn't helpful or necessary to us, then it's likely that we won't get that fun chemical reward. Like, for example, when you are already very good at the game. You need an additional reason to go through it again, and often that reason is to get cool stuff so you can show off to everyone how good you are at hunting monsters. This cool stuff is external, it is extrinsic, but it does provide an internal reward as well. Extrinsic reward does provide us with dopamine, but it has less to do with conditioning behavior important to our survival and instead is much more complicated. And that's where we start to dig into the meat of this topic and why there are so many roads in this intersection. Why, for example, does a game following the rule of cool feel more fun than a game featuring realistic combat? Why does watching Terminator 2 feel more fun than watching The Hurt Locker? Shouldn't we be more rewarded for preparing for real war than fantastical wars that will never happen? What is the evolutionary benefit in escapism? One of the key concepts that you'll often hear discussed in the subject of video game design is novelty. Novelty is the quality of being new or original. It is to be unfamiliar, untamed, wild. The war against Skynet in Terminator is novel to us because usually the wars we know don't feature time-traveling liquid robots. It is novel. And because it is novel, it feels more fun. This is what fuels the rule of cool. It's also one of the theories behind why we laugh. We laugh because we're surprised or something is unexpected, but we also laugh when something is relatable to us. Humor makes us feel less alone. It is binding. The Wundt curve is a concept in psychology that shows how arousal scales from simplicity to complexity and familiarity to novelty. Typically, the things that are higher on the scale of complexity and novelty will be the most arousing, but it can be too much. Sometimes I throw a lot of science or psychology jargon at you in my video essays. I try to balance that out with some personal anecdotes to make it all a little more relatable, and you may have noticed teachers doing this as well. It's an attempt to make the content a little more familiar to you. That's the psychological basis for that. It's so it doesn't become both too novel and too complex. To be too novel is to be alienating. It is too difficult to connect with, and it becomes unrelatable. But if it becomes too familiar, it becomes boring. If the gameplay in a game is simple, then the fun factor is dependent on the novelty in its systems or world. And once the novelty wears off and becomes familiar, like, for example, it being just one more entry in a long-running series, the level of complexity needs to be enough to keep you interested. And that's why there is often a pressure to keep things fresh and new. The core gameplay loop of Monster Hunter is very simple. You hunt monsters. But the method of how you hunt is always novel, and it has varying levels of complexity. One of the things that really struck me when first playing the game is how different each weapon feels to play. It is like a character action game where each weapon is a different character. The greatsword uses big meaty hits and counters to shoulder your way through and ensure your attack lands. The lance uses perfect guard to stay in front of a monster at all times, guarding when a monster attacks like a boxer, ducking a swing and turning that into a meaty left hook. The insect glaive plays a completely different game altogether. The insect glaive isn't playing Monster Hunter at all, it's playing Spider-Man vs. Godzilla, and Spider-Man vs. Godzilla is awesome. And you don't really even need to do much grinding to get a new weapon to play with. It's not an MMO where you need to painstakingly take a fresh character to max level just to see how it plays with its whole toolkit. It's novel, and it is as simple or complex as you really want it to be. The reason why novelty is arousing to us is foundational to the reason why escapism is so important to us. It is because our brain rewards us for experiencing something new in much the same way as practicing survival techniques. The arousal from novelty is a dopamine response. If a cave person spends their whole life in a cave with no incentive to explore or leave their comfort zone, we wouldn't have gotten far. We have a biological imperative to evolve, not just to survive. And evolution is change. This is why animals need stimulation. It's why dogs need to go for walks. It's also part of the reason why we love stories. To walk a mile in someone else's shoes. We love to experience new perspectives. But there is often more going on in our brains when we experience a story than just the dopamine rush of novelty, and it lies in why there is a distinction between entertainment and art. At the start of the year, I made 1000 Times Resist my game of the year for 2024. Is 1000 Times Resist fun? Is Silent Hill 2 fun, for that matter? When is a game not fun, even when it's good? And why? Why do we watch horror, even though it makes us scared? Why do we like sad movies and music, even though they make us cry? Neither of these things are pleasant, they're not fun, but we do seek them out. The reason is because there are different chemicals that release in our brains other than dopamine, and that's why these experiences feel different. Endorphins are why there is a runner's high. It's also the reason why we seek out spicy food. When we get scared while watching a horror movie, for example, we enter fight or flight. The brain tries to keep us rational so that we are capable in that survival scenario, and it pumps endorphins to calm us down. And that's often why we feel much better after a big cry. It's our brain trying to stabilize itself. It is a self-defense mechanism. Monster Hunter Wilds has a story that attempts to provoke some of these emotions. It's one of the things that Monster Hunter Wilds actually does very poorly. The story is very bad. Capcom has a long history of having some of the worst dialogue in video games. Despite the budget they're currently working with, that certainly hasn't changed. I have no idea why they seem to struggle so much with this, but there are long stretches of writing in this that are bafflingly incompetent. Surely they have to understand that this is more fun than this. These moments are not emotionally impactful because they're pretty badly written, so there's no endorphins. They're also not fun because there's nothing novel here. These are familiar tropes that we've seen many times before in better stories, so putting these scenes next to the thrills found in hunting monsters forces an unfavorable comparison. It is tedious to the point that I actually might go so far as to recommend newcomers to the series skip the cutscenes so that they can be more acquainted with the fun stuff, which is not something I say lightly. It really does make a pretty terrible first impression. They did try, and I do acknowledge there is a good deal of pressure on Capcom to make story content in their games that are not story focused, and I do feel for them because I don't think it's fair. They're clearly not particularly good at this kind of thing, and yet they're always criticized for not doing more of it. I don't really need a story mode in Street Fighter, for example. Many people seem to really want that, and I have no idea why, because it's never good. Don't we play Street Fighter to fight? I don't get it. Frankly, I don't really care what Shadowloo is up to. I'd much rather the budget for that content be put towards characters to play as, so I don't need to pay for them separately as DLC. It really seems like a no-brainer to me. Now, I'm not saying Capcom is universally bad at story content in their games. I'm a huge fan of Ace Attorney and Resident Evil, for example, and I find the campy dialogue and plot suit those series well, but they do seem to run into trouble quite a bit. Although I am sniffy about the story in Wilds, Monster Hunter is still very good at broadening your perspective and creating emotional moments. It does that not through its story, but its world. It's the Wilds. It's in how these moving parts function as a lived-in place, a place that you move around in. You, the player character. But not just you, others. Not the characters in the story of Wilds, other people. And there is a lot of fun to be had in working as part of a team. There is a reason why social media is addictive and, yes, fun. Our brain rewards us for behavior that it deems is important for our survival. And one of these chemical rewards is oxytocin. This is the love drug. It is the chemical that is released with physical touch or a nice warm hug, and is the chemical that often helps in the development of empathy and trust. Oxytocin is another of those chemicals that is released when we are listening to music or experiencing art or a good story, because as much as it is important for us to experience the world through another person's eyes, it is also just as important for us to feel like we are not alone. When we have that release of chemicals, when we experience a sad story, it is not just because there is a self-defense mechanism occurring to elevate our mood. It's also because we are relieved to know that there are other people out there that feel the same way that we do. It allows for a greater understanding of who we are, not as individuals, but as human beings. Oxytocin is the chemical that rewards us when we develop social bonds. It is what motivates us to make friends and relationships, and without it, we would have probably gone extinct. It is very important to our development as a species. It's why romance options in video games feel satisfying even when the characters aren't real. It is also why multiplayer games are fun. Some multiplayer games, especially ones that focus on competition, can have the opposite effect because our competitive nature combined with the anonymity of online multiplayer can often bring out the worst in us. But when we can come together as a team to take on a challenge, we get not only satisfaction in the completion of the task, but satisfaction in completing it as part of a unit. Different people will take varying degrees of satisfaction from this, and a core reason for that is in how you may derive your sense of identity, either internally or externally. It is easier to know who you are when people tell you because no one has a more biased opinion of you than you. But some people may not trust the opinions of others because they have a history of being hurtful or wrong. But separate from how much you want or don't want to be part of a team, it is very important to know our role. We want to have a purpose and function in society, even in video games. That is why we have tanks, healers, and DPS classes in games rather than have characters that can do all of these things all the time. We like to specialize. In Monster Hunter, you have a diverse selection of roles to fulfill. Some weapons will be better at severing parts, which allow for more material to be gathered. Some weapons are better at blunt damage, which may stun the monster for longer periods, making the hunt safer. Some weapons can launch you on top of the monster, distracting them and creating wounds which are important for a good deal of the weapons. Some can be played at range, and there is even more variability within these specified roles, such as infusing with status ailments or using crafted items and environmental damage. I found with the greatsword, people would wait for me to wake up a sleeping monster because that was my job as a greatsword user. A job that I had never formally applied for, but was nonetheless responsible. But there is stress and discomfort in working in a team as well, and that can be very unfun. The person choosing to play with a playstyle that is not strong or efficient is always going to be a little annoying for the team who just wants to get a monster down so they can move on to the next one. And that's one of the reasons why balance is a lot more important in multiplayer games than single player games, even when there isn't an element of PvP or competition. It can be a lot of pressure to conform to what the group wants you to do rather than doing what you think is fun. As I was learning the various weapons and digging into how they function as defined roles, I picked up some examples of this. The insect glaive is stronger when played on the ground, which is fucking stupid because why would you be on the ground when you can pogo stick on a monster's head? But it's weaker and people know this, so when they see someone flying up in the air with that weapon, it's likely they will get a little bit of snark. My favorite weapon was the sword and shield. I like playing the all-rounder in games where there are a lot of different gameplay styles. I play Mario and Pokemon Trainer and Smash Bros. I play Ryu and Street Fighter. I like to do a little bit of everything. Now the big, exciting, high-octane damage combo for the sword and shield in Monster Hunter Wilds is Perfect Rush, which is very fun to do because it relies on strict timing, so it becomes like a little rhythm game. But the trouble is, it's not as strong as just whacking away with your basic combo, so while it is more complex and difficult, it's less rewarding, which begs the question why anyone would ever be motivated to do it beyond just wanting to have fun because it's fun to do. Balance is really hard because people want to be strong, but they also want to play in very specific ways. Making everything very strong is hard because if everything is strong, nothing is. Strength is relative. And the pressure to play efficiently is just as stifling as the pressure to conform in society. It doesn't feel good to be told how to behave, even when it's not a person telling you directly over voice chat, but instead through cold, hard math. It is stifling. Because fun is not just about finding a role that you are comfortable and satisfied to perform in. It is not just about following the rules. It is also in the act of being creative. Rules are important. We need boundaries, especially in play, because there is a fine line between a play fight and the real thing. That's the purpose of the rules. Going outside the rules means you're not playing the game anymore, you're playing your own game. For many people, this is actually where the fun is. Before Breath of the Wild, the fun was in exploring dungeons and discovering puzzles which required specific solutions. They required you to follow the rules and solve it with the information provided. They required logical solutions. Breath of the Wild, for the most part, does not. Or at least the intended solution is less important because you have so many more tools to solve puzzles creatively. In the same way that we are rewarded with dopamine for experiencing novelty, we are rewarded with dopamine when we are creative. And that is why being creative is satisfying even when creativity is for its own sake. That's why I started making stuff here on YouTube. It is a very satisfying form of self-expression. Because in the same way we get satisfaction from having a defined role as part of a unit, we get similar satisfaction from having a sense of individuality. One example of this in video games is the character creator. Some people really care about this. Others will make a dude that looks enough like them to not be distracting, give them their own name, and then go hunt monsters. I like making a guy. I take my time to make someone that I'll enjoy spending a good deal of time with, and that person is usually not me. I like to roleplay. In Monster Hunter Wilds, I decided that in order to hunt monsters, I had to become a monster, and thus was born Falkenskold. Creativity is fun, but as I've said many times, everyone's different and our brains prioritize chemicals differently. You may have heard of the concept in psychology of being either left brain or right brain dominant. The left brain is analytical and logical. These are the math people. These are the people who want to know the rules and take satisfaction from completing a task within specific boundaries. The right brain people are creative. They think outside the box. They prefer to think intuitively rather than analytically. Intuition is a concept that is misused a lot in discussions of game design. It's often brought up to ask the question of whether a game needs to do more so you don't get stuck. The Witness is a really good example of intuitive design. I don't want to spoil the game, but a lot of the puzzles require you to think outside the box, and the game does a great job of hiding little clues to direct your focus without tapping you on the shoulder and whispering in your ear. You do still have to work for it, but everything you need is there. Intuition is the ability to come to a solution without being told or taught. It is to come to a solution subconsciously, not consciously. The point is, there are two very different styles of thinking, and they each have their own rewards. However, the idea of there being left or right-brained people is actually a very common myth. It's nonsense. This has long been debunked in psychology, and any personality test telling you which side of the head you lean with is talking out their ass. The truth is that each side of the brain does not perform its role in isolation. The right brain is needed even with math, and the left brain is needed with creativity. The reason people do favor analytical thinking over emotional thinking, or vice versa, is because they have developed those skills more. The synapses in those areas have been strengthened with constant use, so it's natural to choose that skill set when approaching a task, in the same way that you might use your dominant arm to lift something, not because you are right-handed, but because you use the arm more, and so it is stronger. That may seem like semantics, but it's not. Because if you know your non-dominant arm is significantly weaker than the other, you know you should probably prioritize the weaker arm when you work out in the gym so that you don't have one giant arm and one skinny one. It is harder to lift weights on your non-dominant arm, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't lift with that arm, because that would be silly, and that's the trouble with this bogus science of being left or right brain dominant. It's what convinces people that they are bad at math because they did a personality test where they answered that they enjoy painting. There was science to support the idea that women are worse at math than men. But it isn't because female brains favor emotional thinking, it's because women in previous generations didn't study as hard because they knew they weren't supposed to be good at that. And they didn't go to college because what's the point when as soon as you have a kid you have to give up your career? It's true for men as well. If you know you're supposed to be good at math because you're a man, then you have more incentive to study, because if you don't, you aren't masculine. Men have struggled for many years with exams testing for emotional responses, largely because men thought they weren't supposed to know the answers. And that is why we have a mental health crisis. We're not supposed to be good with our feelings. Obviously, things have been changing for a few decades now, and gender roles are a lot less defined than they once were, but it's a slow process, and these things take time. Studies now show that women actually score higher on math exams than men, and the likely explanation is not that women's brains are better at math, but that they have more to prove. Let's hope that men get the same message about mental health one day. That was quite a big diversion. And a bit of a downer, sorry about that. This is supposed to be a video on Monster Hunter and why it is fun. I don't say all of that to get political. I say that because it is important context to understand why some people prioritize fun differently. Because a person who enters a room and sees a puzzle that looks like this is not going to have much fun if they think they have a brain that isn't wired for it. And the same is true for a person that plays Tears of the Kingdom and is given a tool that can literally make whatever they want. It can be overwhelming if they just want the correct answer. Although I am a creative person, in the sense that I do enjoy making stuff, I am actually very much a logical person. I like to consider things very carefully. I like to be well researched, and I like to know that I have all of my ducks in a row. I do like to follow the rules, if only to know how to break them. Following the meta in a video game is like following a set of rules, but it is unique because they are rules that aren't set by the developers and instead are set by the community. Well, they're not set directly by the developers. Metas are set by which options do the biggest numbers, but they are enforced by the community, especially in games where going against the meta makes things harder for the people that do. When I play games, I do typically follow the meta. I don't chase the best options because I don't like to be seen as someone that cares about doing the biggest damage, but if I'm being completely honest, I do care. And I care because other people care. An interesting struggle I had when playing Monster Hunter Wilds on release is that I didn't know the game or how to interpret the meta. And even if I did, the meta hasn't been set yet. My algorithm on YouTube is mostly Monster Hunter stuff at the moment because I've spent so much time finding videos that will tell me which armor, weapons, and skills I should be using. But every day, there seems to be another video coming out saying, this person is wrong, X skill is useless, do this instead. Which is an interesting problem because how do you play to be strong when you don't know what strong is? That was actually very liberating to me because I didn't have to worry about people getting snarky about my build or which combos I was doing because everyone else was in the same boat. But I did continue to fall into this trap of seeing a video which told me X build was best, grinding for hours to make that build, and then find another video that said X build was shit, and anyone following that build was a big dumbo. Great, I thought. That was an afternoon well spent. But it was an afternoon well spent. I had a good time fighting monsters to get the items required for that build. I had fun. I only thought of it as a waste of time when I realized the reward wasn't actually worth it. Suddenly, the whole experience was retroactively less fun. And that's a really weird, unique problem for video games, especially when the meta is still being settled. I wish I was a person who could put all that aside and not think about the numbers I'm doing. In some games, I can do this. Obviously, I've done challenge runs of Elden Ring where I try to make myself very weak, but there's something about the social element that really makes me fall in line and want to be strong, and I think that probably goes beyond wanting to fit in and edges into wanting to show off. Because that's what you do in games when you've defeated every major challenge and built the ultimate build. You want to do big numbers, and you want to look really cool doing it. That's why people grind for rare transmog for ungodly hours, to show off. It's preening, and asserting dominance, even in regard to something as trivial as having a cooler looking weapon, is rewarding on a chemical level. And that is a very different chemical reward to the person who is happy to fly around with the insect glaive, even though it is suboptimal. This is why fun is the intersection of a bunch of roads. Fun, it turns out, is a really tricky thing. It is fun to feel strong, but it's also fun and satisfying to overcome difficulty. It isn't fun to let down a team, but it is fun to stand out as an individual and make choices that are your own as an expression of creativity. These ways of experiencing fun do conflict, and what is fun for one person may not be for someone else. The best a game can do is to give you the tools to experience fun in whatever way you choose, but often this just isn't possible. There are too many variables, and a game may find success in some areas but fail in others. Monster Hunter Wilds does succeed in many, but it does fail occasionally, mainly the story, which is the game's not perfect, but nothing is. One game can be the most fun game in the world to you. You may be hopelessly addicted and prioritize it over your own survival needs. Another person may play it for 5 minutes, decide that it's trash, and uninstall. These brain chemicals release for different reasons and in varying amounts. A person in a deflated mood may prioritize activities that release endorphins. A person who is socially isolated may find greater comfort in the release of oxytocin than a person who has a crying baby in the next room. There are variables. But when a game does connect with a very large audience, when a game is fun for the majority of people, it is usually not because they do one thing very well, but many things. And that is because they allow you to choose to have fun in the way that you like to have fun. I think Monster Hunter Wilds is a testament to that. Thank you to my lovely patrons. Thank you to Bender, Wastoid, Choking on Razors, Blumpkin, and a very special thank you to Lako and Redeemin. As well, of course, to all the lovely people you see here. I spend a good deal of my time playing Monster Hunter Wilds on Twitch. You can find the link to my Twitch in the description, as well as the link for my very own Discord channel, which now exists. Check that out if you do want to get announcements for anything coming up, or if you just want to ask me a question. That's the place to do it. Check it out. If you like this video and you want to see more stuff like it, I really would appreciate it if you'd like the video, maybe even do a subscribe, maybe even leave a comment. Tell me what is fun for you, or don't. I don't know. I'm still figuring all this stuff out and what I should be doing. Is this spiel at the end of my videos annoying? I don't know. I feel really weird self-promoting. Do what you feel like doing. Don't let me tell you what to do. Actually, no, I will tell you what to do just one time. I promise. And that is that I need you, dear viewer, to please, please, have a great day.
You're beautiful.